of what archaeology will do. We begin to learn and teach to our young people and our elders alike on what actually this thing is all about in terms of archaeology. Because without archaeology, you have no real foundation for history. Because oftentimes when we think of history, we're talking about something that happened in the past, but that is not history as it really is. Practically all history is written and orally produced with some eye towards the future. So do not get this notion that when you do history, you're just dealing with the past. You're actually dealing with a grand vision of the future, some kind of conceptual frame. And as a result of having that frame, we go back and look at the unforgettable lessons of the past in order not to make the same mistakes. And that is what history is all about, and that's why these archaeologists in Europe are so interested in telling the story, because they have some idea of what they want the future to be. Okay? All right, so here we have this valley, Nile Valley antiquity that we mentioned, and we mentioned the various countries where this kind of work can be done to give us more of an understanding of what we call the African imperative. With respect to our studies of the Nile Valley institutions and cities and what have you, it then gives us a picture of some areas of spirituality that we have in the past not perhaps given as much thought to, but we do have a number of scholars on that subject. But now, once we start studying the Kushite empires, it gives us new insight on the three religions of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. It gives us a kind of understanding of another way of looking at that phenomenon with respect to the African world. I don't want to take you through all of these. This is what we call in the Kemetic language of how we look at space when we talk about tricontinental antiquity. We're actually looking at northeastern Africa, Western Europe, or the southern part of Europe, as well as Africa itself. And this gives us a kind of a three-way looking at any situation regarding African people. This is the map of ancient Kush, or as we would call it, we can also use the land Nubia. But the important thing for us here is to understand which way the Nile is flowing. The Nile is going towards that map of ancient Kush. And most people actually think it's going the other way. And that's the way it's been taught to our children. So we sort of had an upside-down understanding of our own history and our own purpose and reason for existence. Okay. Here we have another example of the real areas that's going to be studied and researched and re-researched regarding the ancient Kushite empires. And if you look right down here where you see Omdurman or Khartoum, that is where you have the confluence of the two Niles. The White Nile coming out of Uganda and the Blue Nile coming out of Ethiopia, flowing into what is called the Sudan, further down into what we call Egypt or Kemet, and then out onto the Mediterranean. Well, this is where the war is being fought now over interpretation of the Kushite kingdoms and the Nubian people. And now here we have another example of the flooding of all of those. Those are all cities. Those are all sacred cities of ancient Nubia that you see there. And practically all of them are sitting under 300 miles of water now. And this is what happened. And where you see those names, and this is one of the reasons why this is a very important piece of information here, practically every single one of those cities that you see had to be lifted up with whatever they could carry with them and removed and replaced further away, where Komombo is now. For those of you who've been going to Kemet, many of those Nubian villages have been moved away from where the waters are, but they still maintain their identity and their belief in who they are. So we just cannot ignore this. And it's most important to understand the role of these brothers and sisters playing right now in what we call the struggle for the African mind. Here's an example of the flooding, and where we talk about the life and culture of the Nubian people. There's a whole discussion we can have on that, but let's just sort of move this a little bit more. This is a ceremonial gathering. I won't say anything more about that gathering, but I actually took that picture, and this is the discipline that you find in the Nubian communities in what is called the Sudan today. These are examples of our Nubian brothers and sisters, which I'm just going to flash them so you can see them and know that you're looking at African people, okay? And you see African people on camels instead of the other people, okay? And this was a camel race that was about to take place during that time, and they actually stopped and posed. Now we have the felucca on the Nile, which many of us are familiar with, the gift of the Nile, in that the water flows down north, the wind blows up south. And so consequently, one can take what they call the felucca and actually go up the Nile with the assistance of the wind itself. This is the typical Nubian home where it's a story out front. Oftentimes when we say a 3-story building, we don't really understand that that's a horizontal way of explaining where someone lives. I live 3 stories down or in the other direction. And here, of course, is an example of a Nubian home. Lunchtime, a very interesting way of having lunch. I was a part of one of those lunchtime experiences, which meant that if you didn't move fast enough, you didn't eat lunch. Okay? Now, we've been talking about the dynastic orders of the Nile Valley pharaohs. Well, these are not pharaohs from the Nile Valley. They happen to be what is mistakenly called the 25th dynasty because they've been somewhat included into Kemetic chronology, but actually it's probably the 6th Napatan dynasty as far as we can go at this point, when you give them the rightful identity of their own culture and not that of some other group that they conquered or had to throw out of the country during that time. So we will be concentrating on these pharaonic orders. We have to give more information to them, know a little bit more about their experiences. Right now we can only call off those names. We have a number of European scholars who have written on them, but I think it's up to the African community to begin to give that interpretation of the history of the Kushite empires, and not just to concentrate on royalty. We're also talking about the people of Kush as well, and that is most important, should not be left out in our analysis, okay?